Let's go! LSU football fans, Ed Orgeron has a huge decision to make now that spring is over. He has one roster slot remaining for the class of 2021. What should LSU actually spin that roster slot on? Could it be the SEC star receiver Mike Woods, who just entered his name into the portal? We're talking about one of the best deep threats in all of college football is available. But here's the thing. Arik Gilbert, he always finds a way to make it into our videos in a discussion and a live stream or whatever. But Arik Gilbert has a huge influence on what LSU is going to do moving forward. It's even deeper than that because moving forward, LSU is going to have to rethink how they actually manage the roster. And they're paying someone a pretty hefty price to do that for him. So, first thing is, we'll get back to Arik Gilbert in a second. I know you guys get fired up whenever we talk about him. But let's discuss the Mike Woods situation. Because you guys, I don't know if you should actually be concerned about what happened with Mike Woods, or you should be happy. It depends, because this could be a drastic shift we see in all of college football. So stick with me, because I really hope you guys take away what I learned about the future of college football. I'm going to save it a little bit later, but I want you to hear Mike Woods' story. So this is a young man who came to Arkansas at the last second, all right? And I want you to remember that in just a second. But overall, this guy was third in the SEC in yards per catch. Like, he averaged more yards per catch than Kayshawn and Jere Jenkins, who were the best two on the team at that very thing last season. And Mike Woods, 32 catches, 619 yards, and 5 touchdowns. He had a few plays against LSU, but just overall, this guy is really talented at doing the one thing that is hard to do when finding a receiver, which of course is a deep threat. And Mike Woods is definitely that. That is what he does. And he would fit perfectly in this Jake Peetz offense. However, his transfer reasoning was strange. He said himself that it had nothing to do. There was rumors that he was fighting with the coaching staff. He put those rumors to bed. And this guy just a few days ago caught a touchdown in the spring game. He had had a big spring. Heck, the major Arkansas account was promoting him. It was wild. He has a huge YouTube channel with a bunch of Arkansas fans and all of that. So everything was going perfect, but it still wasn't good enough. Now, full disclosure, his coach, who decided to go to Arkansas at the last second a few years ago, and Mike Woods followed him, had decided to leave Arkansas to go to South Carolina this offseason. That's Justin Stepp, their wide receivers coach. So that probably has something to do with it. But look, Arkansas treated him well. Now, he is not their number one option. That would be Treylon Burks, who, to me, it's either him or Kayshawn as the best wide receiver in the SEC right now. But still, Mike Woods was in a pass-happy offense. It just couldn't have been a better situation. Now, he may know more about the quarterbacking and the direction of the team than we do, but still, it just didn't make a whole lot of sense, which is a scary thing about college football moving forward, because the same thing is true with Arik Gilbert. It didn't make a lot of sense that Arik Gilbert decided to, leave LSU when he did, because he was also getting heavy targets. He also was a single-digit number who was getting a lot of playing time quickly in his career, a lot like Mike Woods, and it still wasn't enough. It's wild to think about. But now, if a player feels as if he's not happy where he is, with the immediate transfer rule that we have now in college sports, it gives players more freedom. Now, there's a discussion whether or not that's actually a good or a bad thing. I do think overall it's a good thing, but, I think also players should really think about if the grass is really greener, especially at a position at receiver, which could be very volatile as far as your playing time is concerned. Now, should LSU actually pursue Mike Woods? Well, that brings back Arik Gilbert into the conversation. So the rumors are is that Arik Gilbert is meeting with the LSU coaching staff, and he's trying his best to finagle his way back on the LSU roster. And, there's some hurdles there, obviously, and there's still rumors about what actually happened when Arik Gilbert initially decided to leave the team. So, look, it's wild. His situation is just absolutely crazy. So we don't know what's going to happen. Obviously, I've gone back and forth whether, I want Arik Gilbert back, second chances, all that stuff. We'll see what actually happens. But still, the reason why Arik Gilbert is really relevant to this discussion is we need to know if he would count for that final slot if he decided to come back, which is probably something LSU is trying to figure out right now. Now, the way I understand it and the way it's been explained to me is that he would not count against the final slot. He never officially left LSU's roster. His name was just in the transfer portal. He never actually signed anything over to Florida or whatever. So, that's important to note involving Mike Woods or whoever, because that one final slot is so valuable. Now, how should LSU actually use that final slot? I'm going to give you that answer at the end of the video, but I first want to discuss what needs to change so LSU has more slots remaining moving forward. Because if they had more than one slot, I would probably go on ahead if Mike Woods wanted to come and use it on Mike Woods because he is a really good player. But LSU has bigger positions of need than wide receiver. I also think Jaray Jenkins is better than most people are giving him credit for. I think he has Mike Woods' capabilities as the number 2 option if LSU decides to go with them. Plus, that LSU wide receiver room is just so deep, and they've spent so many roster slots on that position that it's probably good to go elsewhere. So, the first thing before we end this video, Ed Orgeron needs to rethink how he uses slots when it comes to recruiting, because transfers have proven to be really, and I mean really valuable, okay? Look, the 2019 LSU team, Joe Burrow, Thad Moss, Braden Fiocco. The 2020 LSU team, Jabril Cox, Liam Shanahan. The 2021 team, Liam Shanahan, and more than likely Mike Jones. So we've seen in the last 3 years alone, 2 players per roster that has been filled with transfers, guys that are mature, guys that are ready to help you out right now. That's why you should have more slots than just 2 for transfers, because what you're going to see moving forward is more guys that are good players are going to enter the portal. Now, we can get into specific players who should LSU target in the portal, but it's tough because there are so many players. There's well over 1,000, I believe, now currently in the portal. Obviously, LSU's got a staff to sift through those names, but how many of those guys can actually help your roster? Well, we don't know that, but I know for sure Mike Woods would definitely help out LSU's roster right now. So everything that we discussed is precisely the reason why LSU picked up Austin Thomas, who is the general manager of LSU football. Now, Thomas has explained this in interviews. He works for Ed Orgeron. He does not work for the university, whereas general managers for NFL teams work for the NFL team and not the head coach. So this is not your typical general manager, but Austin Thomas is kind of sort of like your normal general manager who is supposed to manage each team's roster, which becomes more complicated. Now, really think about how highly LSU thinks of Austin Thomas. In a year where they lost millions of dollars in a pandemic due to revenue and fans and all of that not being able to go to games, they still, on top of a $2.3 million buyout to Bo Pelini, or whatever the buyout was, for whatever million, on top of all those buyouts and whatnot, they still decided to get Austin Thomas at $300,000 a year, according to Brooks Koplana. Now, instead of, stripping down that department, they've added on. They've actually grown that department. So that's where things get crazy, because what I think LSU should do moving forward is change their philosophy when it comes to recruiting. Of course, take the elite recruits like a Jake Johnson or a Walker Howard or whoever. You obviously need those guys, so Terrence Welch. But leave more slots for transfers. Number one, LSU has been a very transfer-happy school and a very transfer-friendly school. Ed Orgeron has played a lot of transfers and, in turn, made a lot of them millionaires, okay? So with that, it makes LSU a very fun place for transfers to go. I think Mike Jones is going to be great, and then, Liam Shanahan and whoever else for this next season. So with that said, I want to go back to a video I did I think it was a month or so ago, on Kendall Daniels. LSU was going to use their final roster slot on another high school player in the class of 2021. Kendall Daniels was committed to Texas A&M. He decided to not sign there. In fact, he backed out of his signature, and LSU, who was after him the first time, tried to get him, and he still decided to go to Oklahoma State. And that's who they would have used the final slot on, not an experienced college guy, not someone that could help you right away, just another high school prospect, which would have been a gigantic mistake, because two things have happened since then. Number one, the portal has grown. There are more talented help you now guys that are available in the portal. And number two, the need at safety is not quite the same as it once was. They moved Jay Ward on over there. Jordan Tolles has looked better. They're also going to have Todd Harris. Derek Davis Jr. is coming along. And then Sage Ryan, Matthew Langlois are also coming in. So, yes, Ed Orgeron really wanted to get a safety in the portal or from wherever. And I am still a little worried about the safety position, but it's no longer the biggest position of need. And on top of that, this final slot is not someone you want to use on a prospect. What you need to use it on is guys that you really need to help your roster. And there is one position group that is just screaming at LSU right now, I need help. And that position is the LSU offensive line, which, even though the defenses could not blitz on the spring game on Saturday, the LSU offensive line still had a rough day at the office. Now, there was some good instances of really good pass protection, but they were also not decent in other spots. And you'll see on our Sunday night film study, part 2, where we go through the second half of each and every play, how the offensive line broke down. By the way, if you want to see part 1, that is linked down below. So that first team offensive line, maybe they could find another offensive line starter in the portal, which is why Austin Thomas is someone that knows more about this than me, because that might not only be an issue because there's not any offensive linemen. There could also be an issue that LSU has some certain restrictions on certain players in the portal. And some of that might be, here's the thing, and this is the case with any program, there might be some off-field violation or rule, NCAA bylaw that prevents you from going after a certain guy. So I wanted to add that in there. So you need that one final slot. I would like to use it on an offensive lineman if there is one there. Now, I know what a lot of you would say. Well, Connor, there might not be an offensive lineman in the portal who is better than any of our current starters. Well, number one is the current starters are not that great. Okay, I think we can all agree on that. They're good, and we're hoping they can leap forward with another year experience, but I'm not totally confident. So you don't know if any offensive lineman in the portal is better. Number two, it really doesn't matter because unlike some of the other positions on the team, LSU's backups on the offensive line are not that great. They are not that great. The second team LSU offensive line was more bad than good in the LSU spring game. Now, full disclosure, I know what a lot of you are going to say. Well, Carter, our defensive line is really good. And you're right. But once again, there were no blitzes, and they were just overall really bad. And you'll see, once again, on the second half film study this coming Sunday night, I'll point out all the different times the LSU offensive line, particularly the second group, really, really struggled. So, I don't think safety is no longer the biggest position of need. Now, we can have a discussion whether position of need and you reaching to get a player at a position of need compared to getting a position player like a Mike Woods who's not a position of need, but you know he's very good, so let's use the slot on someone quality, and I totally get it. The best player available mentality, which I normally believe in, but I do believe the LSU offensive line is in a glaring position where they need depth, and they need depth really, really, really bad. I hope you enjoyed this video today. It was a little bit different, but yeah, it is Power Hour LSU. Boom! You know what's funny? I had that quesalupa from Taco Bell. I used to always eat chalupas growing up, and it was pretty good. I got to give you that, Taco Bell. Please sponsor my channel.